Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook. Appreciate your being out there in TV land tonight. And tonight, we're going to have a conversation with Mr. Gary C. Smith. And Gary is a coach and teacher in the art of public speaking, which might sound pretty either interesting to you or terrifying to you, but it's something that everybody, whether they realize it or not, does and almost on a daily basis, some type of public speaking activity. So we're going to have a great conversation with Gary, and he's going to explain a lot of things to us. So Gary, welcome to Reference Point, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here tonight.
Really appreciate you driving down for this. So let's start jumping right into this. You know, you've got quite a varied background. You and I have had some conversations about some of the things that you've done. And I'm curious, how did you come to be a public speaking coach and trainer? What happened that made that occur?
I thought about this quite a bit, Dave, because we did talk about some of the questions, and I decided I would be real honest. When somebody said, "I'll pay you to coach me," I said, I'm a public speaking coach. Because I'd been a public speaker. I'd been a public speaker since 1970 is where I first started. I started teaching creative visualization in the classrooms up in Portland, Oregon. I'm originally from Oregon. So
your public speaking activity began as a teacher in a college format or something, or high school format, or was it more like you went to Toastmasters and that sort of thing?
Well, I went to the high schools that I went to in Portland, and I talked to the psych professors there and said, I have this program I'd like to bring in to teach your students how to creatively visualize what it is that they want to do in their life, whether it's some people need to deal with stress. I was an athlete, I was a bowler at the time, so I had great abilities to visualize my bowling tournaments before I ever got into them, and I could see that people need to speak. Public speaking is what happens when you actually open your mouth. It's any time you speak to another person.
Right.
So there's certain rules or certain fundamentals that make it work so that people can actually connect with each other. So over the years, over the last 45 years or 42 years, I've been to thousands of different seminars, and I've spoken at thousands of different seminars, and everything from weddings to eulogies to keynotes, those kind of things.
So which actually takes me to a question that I was very interested in, and you and I had shared some of this conversation earlier. You started this process in the high school arena, which when I think about high school, middle school, elementary school, the time when you can really help shape the concepts of a person and empower them to do things like stand up in front of a group and give a presentation, or talk to your boss or your employees or whatever. Those kinds of skills, those are skills.
Yes.
You're not born with it. Those are skills that you learn. Mm-hmm. Have you, in your observation with respect to the education system, do we do much of that type of training anymore in the schools? Or have we ever?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think we ever have. I think we've missed some of the main points of what learning is all about. Learning is not about knowing answers. Anybody who's out there in the real world dealing with a work situation knows it's the questions that we ask that get us what we want. And we have an education system that needs to be measured, and because it needs to be measured, we need to have answers. I don't know about you, I was pretty good in math in high school. I'm still waiting to use that quadratic equation. I'm 65 years old, it still hasn't happened. But what I learned in 7th grade speech class, I'm still using that on a daily basis. And I've evolved from that a long ways over the years and stuff. But that's a place, you know, there's a lot of us that's where our self-esteem comes from.
Sure.
And that's where learning, the state of California spent millions in the early 90s to find out who was learning and who wasn't. And it was those people with self-esteem. So by not offering them speech classes, from not even handwriting's not available anymore. Unless you've got money, you're not going to play the tuba.
Yeah,
those kind of things that are going to build up self-esteem, because to be a good speaker and to be successful in business, you need to feel good about who you are.
What's interesting about what you just expressed, at least to me it's interesting, is that we're talking about, at that age, very tiny, small things. The ability to learn how to play an instrument, teach them how to do that, or to stand up and give your name and tell me what your daddy does, you know, for work and that sort of a thing, which then gives the young person that sense of, I can do this, okay?
Right.
And if you reinforce that very early in age, then it should at least carry forward. One would hope that it can carry forward. But if you don't, then trying to learn how to do that when you graduate college and you have to go look for a job, that's terrifying.
Exactly. Exactly. It keeps me in business. It does. Seinfeld said one time, if Most people at a funeral would rather be in the box than have to give the eulogy, which is a sad state of affairs, because what we're talking about then is honoring a person. And in the whole concept of public speaking, there's a major ritual that the speaking is just part of it. The other part of that ritual, that was the magic that happened to us as humans when we started to learn how to listen to each other. Really listen to what a message is, not just allow somebody to give his story and then you give your story, to actually interact and create more energy and more understanding, because you are able to listen, and then you start building upon your speaking skills.
Right.
So you know that how important it is to deal with the biggest fear in public speaking. It's not the words, Dave.
What is it?
It's this quiet moment.
Ah, of course.
It's the pause. It's the time to let that joke sink in and get excited because somebody laughed about it and somebody didn't get it. And then they laugh when somebody else that didn't get it gets it. And just allowing that space. People, when they're giving, when I go to networking events, people want to stand up and tell you who they are and what they do.
Right.
Every time they add a filler, one of those ums, those ers, those ahs, or they run right through it to go speak as fast as they possibly can, you don't get what their message was.
Right. Of course not. Right. You don't have the opportunity to allow it to come in. It just is going by so fast.
Right.
Too much data input at any one moment in time.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that you mentioned here that I think is worth focusing on for a moment is that when we're in this conversation, when we're talking about public speaking, it's not the keynote address at the conference, it's not the valedictory address at graduation, that's not it. It's you sitting, it can be as simple as what we're engaging in right now, sitting here at a table with just the two of us having a conversation. That is public speaking, because you happen to be a person. So
thank you for noticing, Dave.
That kind of came to me in a blinding flash of insight. And so that's where it's that simple. It's that foundational.
Right. It is. It's speaking to your wife. It's talking to your children with respect, with honoring them, with appreciating them. Public speaking is any time that you get out of your head and stop that internal dialogue that's running you crazy all the time and start attempting to connect with another human being. That's public speaking.
A lot of times, though, don't we have a concern or a fear about expressing what it is that we're thinking, or that, you know, do I really want somebody else to know what my situation is? Do I really want to find out what's going on over there? Do I? So there's a tendency, I think, to pull back on that and to not express. And I'd be interested in your perspective on that and how you get people to go beyond that.
Well, that's going to open us up quite a bit there. And we start talking about beliefs, because we all are making beliefs before we're able to really discern what's true and what's false in the world right now. Between ages of our conception and about age 5, we make a number of what I call childhood imprints that says the world's not safe, or I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not big enough. It could happen from the silliest thing. The child dumps over the milk, gets screamed at, suddenly mom's not good. And their body literally does a trauma form. It changes their breathing patterns and stuff, builds that trauma in, and that's one of the reasons that we have public speaking fear. Because we did, at one point in our life, made a faux pas. We took responsibility for something that we had absolutely nothing to do with, you know. And then as we grow older, we begin to find the places that say, oh, this is true, this is true. Oh, of course I'm not smart enough. Oh, somebody breaks into our house, the world is not a safe place.
So you find the circumstances, or you interpret the circumstances as validating that particular belief that it's not a safe space, or I can't do this, or whatever.
Got it.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. So I think that if you're dealing with beliefs, and we're all dealing with beliefs, and I like to, in our seminars that we do, we put a little parentheses when we talk about belief systems. We call them BS, you know, because people don't take the time to see, does this belief system serve me? Did I actually choose to have this, or is this indoctrinated? Did I take it from my parents, who took it from their parents, who took it from their parents? And that's where all these bigotry, racism, those kind of belief systems start coming from. They're passed down. They may be ours. It may never have looked at them in the first place.
So how do we distinguish the history and the legacy of the family from the belief systems that may or may not be valid? Because you don't want to lose your legacy, but you also don't want to be confined by the fact that there's this thing that I feel like I'm supposed to do because they said so when I was little. Is there a way to allow both things, to allow one to exist while the other one you can remove?
Yes, I totally believe that that is true, that you can do that. And I think what happens is we have limiting beliefs about us as a human being. We start thinking of ourselves as a noun. I am Gary. I am the speaker. I know this. And we have like we form a fulcrum that has just this one point on it. And so we're going to have these swings that are huge. But if you think of yourself as a verb, I'm a speaker, I'm connecting with Dave, I'm sitting here right now, I have a wife, I have grandchildren, I have children. That broadens that base, and we don't get tipped quite so far, and we're able to look from that base to see a multiple of points of view.
Okay.
And in that multiple points of view, in the world of communication and in all the world in general, the person who has the most flexibility of behavior is going to get what they want. If there's only one way to do that, only one answer, well, that's going to work sometimes. But if you've got a broader base, you're going to be able to have greater flexibility, more points of view, and more ways of looking at it from other people's points of view.
I'm thinking about that as from what you had just said, because the way I like to perceive things for myself, when I have a problem or an opportunity or whatever, I kind of look at things as, try to be from a spherical perspective. Let's put this thing in the middle and look at it from every possible angle, top, bottom, left, right, you know, because just looking from one perspective, you can't possibly gather the entire universe of information about that thing.
Right.
And you may never, even if you try to look at everything, because everything's dynamic, it keeps changing. But I think the beauty of what you just said is that if you broaden that base for yourself and you don't narrow yourself as I am this, or you know, as opposed to a who rather than you call it a noun rather than a verb, you give yourself the opportunity to be flexible.
Right.
And I guess flexibility is a key thing. I mean, I know as a speaker, I do a lot of public speaking workshops and seminars, and you have an idea of what you're going to go up and say, and you have the slides and all that sort of stuff. But depending upon what goes on, the questions that come up, or the response from the audience from what you've just said, you may need to make a real-time shift and go in a different direction. But if you don't have the sense of flexibility to be able to do that, you're lost. You're not going to get anywhere.
We've sat board many times with a speaker who has one thing to say, and they have one direction to say, and they don't take into account that part of what's going on is the audience. Just like we're speaking here.
Right.
These questions that you're bringing up are moving us in a direction there. It's the same thing with any type of public speaking. There's a direction. There's an intention behind it on some level. And you need to be aware of the other person. You need to put your attention on the other person, move it back and forth, which is one of the big keys in public speaking where the fear comes from. Because the fear is not over there.
Right.
The fear is right here.
Right.
The fear is right here. And as long as I keep my attention on myself, I can scare myself. I can. But if my attention is on you, is on the audience, I mean, my theory on public speaking is my job as a public speaker is to fall in love with my audience so they fall in love with me.
Interesting. Very cool. I like that perspective. So the fear thing, which so many people struggle with, even to the point of, I got to call my boss and tell him about this project. You know, the fear thing is, how do you address that? What is the way for an individual to begin to come to let that go, I guess is the way to say. How do you let that go? Well, in my training, if I'm working one-on-one, the first thing that I do with you is I get a check-in form. I find out where you're at. I ask a bunch of questions about your skill level, your challenges, what do you want, what do you think about your mother, what do you think about your father, what did your mentors tell you. I have 20 different questions to find out whether you're a morning person, an afternoon person, whether you need a cup of coffee to get going, whether you can remember songs, whether you can remember jokes, all those kind of things to get them in the mode to start looking inwardly at themselves to see what's there. It's the classic story of the woman who's in Boston wants to get from Chicago to New York. You're in Boston. You want to get from Chicago to New York. Something's not jiving there. Quite, yeah. Right. So we need to know where that's at in the first place. And that's usually my first session. But at the same time, the next thing I do is I'm going to get you to tell jokes. I'm going to have the scripts going to be there and get you to tell jokes, get you to start laughing about the only person that you can laugh about, and that is yourself. Right. And it changes your breathing. Well, that's the whole thing about whether you take yourself totally seriously or not. Yeah. And if you can manage to not take yourself so seriously, it just, I mean, there's a big difference. I've seen it, and I've seen it in people. I've had my own personal experiences with, you know, how, you get real serious about a subject, and then, you know, but if you can back away from that, you can allow yourself to just recognize, hey, you know, everyone makes mistakes, so why can't I, type thing. You know, it just becomes a lot less of an issue. I want to go into a topic right now, Gary, though, tied into this, and that has to do with technology, because technology has impacted our communication greatly in the last 20, 30 years, especially now when you've got smartphones and devices where you can text message and Twitter feeds and all that sort of stuff, where the communication has gone from visual, you know, face to face, and then we went to phone, so you had voice, okay? And now, unless you're using Skype or something like that, where you can get a visual image, an audio image, we're moving so much in the direction of just text-based communication. And I'm wondering what your observation is on how that has impacted the public speaking capabilities and scenarios for people who are into the technology.
If we take it all the way back, they thought when writing came along that was going to destroy human connections. They actually thought that, and for the longest time it was just the priests who knew how to write. And they thought when the public started writing, well, we're going to lose this human connection again. I'm sure that it happened when the phone first came out, when Mr. Alexander Bell started the phone out there, and when the radio came out. Oh, that's it, we're never going to be sitting around telling stories again. So I recently wrote an article about the opposable thumb. I mean, remember your anthropology class? This is how humans, we came down from the trees because we could grab the stick, and we could hit the saber-toothed tiger, and then we could get a knife, we could cut it up and have fillets and stuff. So now we're at the point where it seems like we're going the other way. And I think that that is a really big challenge, and it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen right along with the overloads of baggage that people have in their homes, the clutter that's occurred, that they're no longer going to be able to connect with other people. We're going to have a certain percentage of the population that are going to just punch out, and the only way they're going to communicate is by texting. I think it's going to be tragic on some level, and that we need to make some kind of major effort to keep that from happening, because it's like the sedimentary thing of the couch potato. You start losing those things, and they actually found out that genetically, this Genome Project found out that people who have the predisposition to be a couch potato, the next generation has that predisposition too. It's now being passed on genetically. So if you're texting all the time, if you're texting when you're breastfeeding your child, or you're talking on the phone instead of paying attention to your child, it's going to have an effect. It's going to make it okay for that child to do the same thing, do the same thing, and we lose the human connection.
That's interesting, because I see a lot of, I occasionally, not as much now because my kids are older, but I've seen circumstances where, especially kids in their teen years, I mean, they'll be sitting around the same table in the same room, and they're not talking to each other. They're sending messages via, you know, smartphone. They're texting each other, and it's real interesting to observe that. And I wonder, how do we, as a society, try to rekindle the possibility of having one-on-one or one-on-group kind of conversations, not digital conversations, but real conversations, because the impact of that, of not being able to do that, things in writing can be easily misinterpreted. You don't hear the inflection of the voice, you don't see the look on the other person's face, and it's easy to have something that someone wrote that's a compliment to you become an insult. And you can end up causing severe problems because of that sort of a thing. So what can we do to try to rekindle that?
As human beings, we can hire speech coaches.
Well, there you go.
Well, I love that one.
What does the school system need to do?
The school system needs to put some emphasis on speaking. They need to outlaw, I think, I don't like to put myself in a position where I say, limit this and don't do that. I think the other way around, that we should spend more time teaching them the joys of public speaking, what they can actually get from that. Look at what are the treasures that are there.
Accentuate the positives,
right,
as the old song says.
Yes, right.
Interesting.
Right. Stay away from Mr. In Between is the next
Yeah.
line in the song there.
Right.
You know, get positive. Say, take a step. What we're watching, what we see in the videos, what we see in the movies, what we see on TV, is people actually talking. We're not seeing people texting there. We get
Right.
excited to go to a movie because people are communicating with each other. We get excited to watch the Oscars, for example, or the Grammys or something like that, where people are standing in front of the group, and young people look at those as role models, and they're saying, this is what they want to do. We can set up classes that have those opportunities for kids.
So besides what you do from a professional level, do you know of any organizations that are trying to proliferate this perspective into the school systems and things?
There is sections of Toastmasters, for example. Certain governors in certain areas of Toastmasters have taken it on themselves to go to different schools and teach kids at a certain age that way. There's also, I judged a couple of contests last year, and I forget who it was, but they were having speech contests there.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a long time since I've heard about any contests, thespian type contests.
Right.
Right. We're a competitive society. That's one way we learn.
When I was in high school, it was, you know, you're the debate club, and then you had impromptu speaking and extemporaneous speaking and oratory. You go to these contests, and there'd be hundreds and hundreds of kids there. I don't know if they still do that. Maybe they do. I don't recall my children being offered the opportunity to do that when they were in high school, but it was sure a lot of fun for me. And it got me past any of those concerns that I had about standing up and talking, you know, which was fabulous. That made a big difference in my life. So, well, this is very interesting. You said, I'm going to go back to something that we had talked about earlier, and actually we only have a few minutes left in our show here, so I'm probably going to invite you to come back and enjoy some more time at this table having additional conversations. But something that has come up in our discussions earlier was a statement that you had made, or actually I saw it on your website, that your message, it says, your message is more than your words, right? And so maybe you can start to give a little bit more perspective on exactly what you mean by the statement that your message is more than your words.
Well, the classic line came out of Cal in the 50s. They did some studies on communication and found out 55% of what is being communicated is body language. 38% is vocal tone, and 7% is just the words that are there.
7% is the words.
7% is just the words. I think they overreacted a little bit at that point. It was a case of getting people back in their bodies so their body's talking. Their body's actually having a message and saying something. I know my mother used to say to me, yeah, well, that's not what I wanted to hear. It's not the way I wanted to hear that there. And she could say that in a way you'd go, oh, yeah, I am being kind of pissy about this whole thing, you know. So we learned that way. We learned a certain vocal tone in order to work with that. And with our children, did we have a louder tone for the children sometimes when they're not listening when the TV's up? Yes, we did. In speaking, one of the things that I like to do is get people to be congruent with what their message is and what their body is saying. Are there gestures there? Some of us who have English background don't have the good Mediterranean stuff that's going on there with the hands there. Our postures, is it showing strength? Are we slumped? Are we losing some of the intensity that we want to carry in the message? Or are we too intense there at times? So the body has a great deal to do with it. There's people that will say, my name is Gary Smith, and they're shaking their head like this, and you know they're not. It's incongruent.
I do a lot of singing. I sing, and I think some of the audience knows I sing with a men's chorus, a barbershop chorus, and one of the things that they talk about all the time with respect to the performance value of what it is you're communicating is, you know, you might be singing a very romantic song, but if it doesn't show on your face, you have to engage the body in the messaging as well, because the audience isn't going to get it. You'll put the audience to sleep. You'll turn the audience off. So what you're, and from what you were just saying, I'm able to kind of transfer that concept from a performance value into just your everyday communication. You need to be able to recognize that it's more than just, like you said, the words. There's the physical makeup of how you're looking when you're saying what you're saying. And people, I think, tend to divorce themselves from that. Somehow or other, they cut themselves off from that, and I'm not sure why that is. Does this go back to your beliefs thing that we talked about earlier?
It could, you know, the cliche, walk in the walk, walk in the talk. It's a real piece. It's a real piece. We know that. We can recognize that. If fear is running you, if your motivation is to stay away from those scary places of taking a risk there, you're going to do those things to keep from being overly excited. You know, we've actually built a coolness to life. The Fonz, we're dating ourselves on this one here, says, oh, I'm so cool. You know, yeah, you don't want to get too excited about that. Why not? Why not get excited about what you're excited about? Why not get passionate about what you're passionate about? Why not take that time, if you have a message, impact that message? You know, it's one of the reasons I went back to becoming a public speaker was because this is something that's going to last me until I'm dying, until I'm dead. It's there. It's something that I can play with, and I play with every day with my voice to see how it is I can impact people and get people to see it's important to connect. It builds our structure. It allows us to feel each other and feel connected. We're in a world now where it's tough for people to feel that they belong anymore.
Right.
You know, our religions have gone kind of in squirrely places. It's hard to define the political parties anymore. Yeah, we're a Cal fan, or yeah, we're a 49er fan.
Right.
We assume those kind of things to get a belonging.
There's a lot of noise built around that.
Yes.
I am going to invite you to come back for another show.
Oh, great.
I'll let the audience know that we're going to do this because we've run out of time here, but I want to take up what we've just started talking about and build on that, because I think that's a layer of foundation that we might be able to impact some people and have them recognize that they can move forward and move out. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us here at Reference Point today. If you have any questions about the show, for the guests or whatever, send your queries to info@referencepointtv.com. We'll be happy to get those questions answered and make sure that those queries go to the right party, to Gary, if it's about this topic. So again, thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode of Reference Point, as we'll have more from Mr. Smith, and appreciate your being there. We'll see you next time on Reference Point.